Hello, career thought leaders. It's good to see you today. And we are going to be talking about how you make a memorable brand. And I thought this article was interesting. It talked about the difference between a memorable brand and an impressive brand. And it kind of goes back to the idea that people would rather hire someone who's likable than someone who's competent. I mean, obviously, you still have to be competent, but it goes back to some research from Harvard from a while ago, just looking at how we want to know people, right? We want to like people, and then yes, we'll do business with them. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Go ahead and drop a note. Let me know that you're joining us. And Valerie, I'm excited to chat with you as well, and looking forward to the conversation. So again, always doing some research, doing our weekly research we do for our newsletter. This was an article that we shared a couple of weeks ago in our newsletter, just thinking about how important it is to be memorable, but what causes someone to be memorable. And it's really a connection. It's a story, perhaps. It's little things that we can do over and over again to be memorable and to stand out. And we know that if we're working with people in job search, this is so important. You know, if we go in and we interview, who are they going to remember when they go back and the team is talking about it? It's going to be that story. Do you remember the person who said X, Y, and Z? And leaders, the same thing. If we're trying to build our brand inside of an organization, we do that by having a consistent, kind of, what's the right word? Relevant, but also connective story that our teams will remember, that they'll align with, right? If you've ever been in an organization and you've heard a leader tell a story and you just thought, that was kind of nice, but it's not relevant to me. Or maybe even sometimes leaders have stories that even make them sound more removed from the people that they're leading. Want to be careful of that when we're doing this with our clients. It's not just about them, it's about what connects them to their clients. And so that's part of the challenge that most people have with branding, is that it isn't just about you. It's also about how you're going to connect with that audience. How are you going to tell stories that resonate with them? Because when we that don't resonate, it makes it so that we are either not remembered or maybe even worse, remembered, but for something that made us sound like we weren't a fit. So that's where we're headed. We know that it's a crowded market. We've talked about how it isn't really even who you know, it's who knows you, who remembers you, and what do they remember about you. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So what is impressive, right? Impressive is credentials, accomplishments, skills, the things that we might hear people talk about. And if it doesn't connect, it may not even just not be remembered. Again, it may be remembered for a wrong reason, because yes, we've got a story, but it isn't relevant. So what makes someone memorable is that emotional connection, the narrative, their unique approach or their unique story that no one else can duplicate, but also is framed in a way that aligns to the audience. So most of us have lots of stories that we can tell, which is good. You want to help your clients think through those stories. Then they're going to pick the stories that will resonate with their audience. So if I'm talking to university people, I'll talk about my university days and working in higher education and talking to students and building programs, right? Those stories make sense for that audience. If I'm talking to entrepreneurs, I'll talk about the entrepreneurial stories and leaving the university and starting my own thing. You've got to know who your audience is so that the stories connect. So one of the things that, as I was kind of researching this and putting my outline together, some of the suggestions were talking about one story, right? Have your one story. And that's not really, I wouldn't give that advice. I don't think most people can just have one story. And then it assumes that your audience is homogeneous, which isn't true. So I would encourage us to come up with 4, maybe 5 stories, but be really clear about two things. One, what is it that this story tells about me? How does it connect with and demonstrate my strengths, my unique perspective? And two, which audience is this going to resonate with? So if we're working with leaders, we're helping them think of stories that might resonate with their peers, might resonate with their customers, and might resonate with their teams, and that they really understand that connection, which story to tell at which time. The one thing that we want to think about is the thread that goes through those stories. That's your brand. So when we think about what do you want to be known for, you have a story of how that has showed up in different places, in different ways, and that can come into the story. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, your examples, maybe what questions you ask clients to be able to uncover those stories or that thread. I'm going to give you a brief example. For instance, when I was at the university environment, I'm strategic, right? And I'm a learner. I love to do those things. And they show up in everything that I do. So we were trying to recruit more students to the graduate school program, and specifically more women, students from different universities we'd never had before, smaller universities, and outside of countries that we were usually getting applicants for. So we were trying to get people from different places, different types of folks that could come into the program. I went and I looked at the best practices for other universities who had a good diversity in terms of people they were getting from different locations, genders, all of that. And we said, okay, what are they doing, first of all? And then how can we replicate that in our framework? We were kind of a smaller program. And we built a program to build connection with some of the undergraduate schools we hadn't had connection with before. How could we bring some of their undergrads in? How could we have those conversations? And what were they looking for? Or maybe why did they go to some of the other organizations? So that strategic piece of recruiting, building that program, building visibility. Then you take the entrepreneurial side and you think, okay, the strategy there of saying, okay, this is where the organization has been, this is where I want it to go, or this is where it needs to go to stay connected to the trends, to give people what they need. And that strategy that we've outlined at Career Thought Leaders to expand our international footprint, to go to Europe for some of our conferences, that same strategy, grow visibility, grow the people participating, right? Same strategy, strength, similar story, different audience, different connection points. So when we work with our clients, and it doesn't have to be based on strengths. Strengths are a great way to look at it. And I love to pull strengths from stories, as well as use tools like the strengths work out of Gallup, the Gallup strengths work. But you can find people's threads a lot of times just by hearing the stories that they're most proud of, right? What is it that they look back on their career and are proud of? What are some of those accomplishment stories? But then instead of just telling the accomplishment story, we're pulling for that thread, because when that thread shows up, it does some like little magic in the story that now, instead of it just being about the accomplishment, it's about that internal, hey, this is what I love to do, or this is one of my strengths. And it brings a different connection to the story than just, hey, this is what I've accomplished. So when we help people do that, then they can tell that story in different formats for different audiences. Maybe they have 2 or 3 of those signature stories that they can tell depending on where they're at. I would actually caution people to having one story, because then what happens is they show up and they tell that story to an audience where it doesn't resonate, and they end up feeling like they don't care, feeling like they're just not engaged. Maybe you've seen that. Maybe you've been there before. I remember being in a presentation, keynote from a woman who was very, well respected, and everybody was so excited she was speaking. And I just thought, well, your story doesn't resonate. I'm not sure how it's resonating with very many people in here, although I was not the same as maybe some of the people in the room that she was telling that story to. But if the story doesn't resonate, it won't be memorable for the right reasons. So we're building that trust factor by having a story that's authentic, that's true, that's connected to me. And I'm thinking about, how does it connect to you? That's what makes it do what it needs to do in terms of the brain chemistry and memorability and connection, right? There's some research that we build stronger bonds with people, that we laugh together, that we cry together. Like if you are trying to build community for any kind of group, those are some of the keys, right? Bring in a speaker, bring in an activity that's going to make everybody laugh or get people crying, because those emotional experiences make us stay connected. And in some ways, we're wanting to have our leaders or our job seekers do the same thing. Their stories aren't going to make people laugh, maybe, or cry, but they're going to bring that common experience of the struggle that they've overcome, or the accomplishment, the turnaround. We want to have a little bit of emotion in that so that it resonates with the audience. So we go through our stories. We're picking out, these are the things that make you feel proud. These are the things that are really interesting to you. That's important. It's got to come from that, or kind of organic, authentic place. Then we're saying, what does the audience care about? And that's when we start framing our story. So if we say, what's the hook? That hook is going to change depending on the audience. And sometimes a hook can be intimidating. I would encourage people just to tell the story first, and then to think about what part of that story might be most, engaging to someone else. And then we can start from there with the story. Oftentimes, that's actually towards the end of what someone says. They get going, they start telling their story, and then there's this sweet spot towards the end that you might want to put at the beginning of the story and then keep walking it through. Then we want to think about what of your characteristics show up in that story. So if we are telling the story, we don't want it to just tell a story. We want to make sure we're weaving through there that strategic strength, or whatever it is that you want to be known for. We want to make sure that's woven into the story. So you can see how this is going to take a little bit more thought than maybe some people are used to. And then, of course, the outcome or result, which may be the hook, but then you circle back around to it at the end so that you're making that connection. And whether you're working with leaders or job seekers, this is really true today, that you're trying to come up with that story. So I'd love to hear from some of you, maybe not right now, but if you come back later, what are those stories that are connected to you? If you had to tell a story, and maybe even what are some of the strengths that you would build those stories around? If you've taken the Strengths Finder or you've done some other work, what are those things that you want to be known for? You get a few, maybe up to 3. What are those things that you want to be known for? So I love seeing these. Anthony talking about working with students in community college. Start thinking about those stories. And so this is one of the things I love about personal branding, Anthony. So personal branding is agnostic in some ways from paid experience. So students' personal brands show up in the way they handle school projects, their volunteer work, the youth employment that they've had, the way they interact with their family. What does their family come to them for? What shows up? So I can see little brand, I can see little brand glimmers in my 7-year-old and my 9-year-old. So they just, my 7-year-old just turned 7 this last week, is very fun. And I can see their brands already. So have your students talk to the people who are close to them. What do they see as those threads that show up in everything the person does? Because I can guarantee you their parents can see it. Their teachers they've been with a long time can see it. Their friends can see it. Like I said, I could already see it in my kids, right? My 9-year-old question everything, always has to figure things out for himself, right? He's got that learner input. Like that is who he is. Hopefully his new teacher for the school year that starts tomorrow can see that as his strength and help him build on that, because it can be aggravating to adults because he does kind of think he knows everything and he is actually really smart. So it's hard. Then my 7-year-old, he is the like go along to get along, singing everywhere. Like he's got that positivity would probably be one of his strengths, right? We can already see that. So your students don't have to base their brand in experience. It's one of the things I love about it. It is based in who they are, and they can figure out how to tell the stories in a way that connects to the audience that needs to know them. So it may be a story of their family or whatever, and you can figure out what's the right language and framing to tell that story so that would come across to someone else in a good way. But it doesn't have to be based on work, which is so, I think, refreshing for all of us, but especially for those who are young, maybe don't have that experience. They can feel like, hey, I don't have a brand because I don't have experience. It's like, yes, you do. You already do. You have probably since you were 5 or 6, right? So this is one of the things that we do with our university personnel all the way through, all the different types of career services providers that we work with. How do you help people uncover those pieces of the brand? And how do we help them do that in a way that feels empowering, not based on things that they don't have, right? We build it on the things that they do have. All right. So after we get some of those stories down, again, it's not about repetition or redundancy or telling the same story over and over again. That gets old for you and everyone else. Having those a few key stories that we can adjust, we can change a little bit, we can, but always know that thread. And that thread is what we're helping people come up with, that unique promise of value. So then we think about what are all the different ways that we could get that story out there, and how could you live that story out loud without having to try too hard, right? We don't want it to be exhausting, although it is work. So we're not going to pretend that it's not, but we're not trying to be somebody that we're not. And that's important to think about. We're just out there figuring out how to tell the stories we want to tell and that will resonate with our audience. But it doesn't have to be, it can't be faked, forced, made up, right? It's got to be those real stories and the ones that do give us energy. That's why starting with your accomplishments, the things you're proud of, is so important, because then we have that moving forward, that it's stories you are proud of. It's stories you are enlivened to tell, right? That's what we're looking for. And then we want to make sure that that brand strength, as well as the relevant skills, are thought about and placed in the stories as we go through. We might help people come up with visuals. I think that's what people think about when they think about branding. So I do a very little step of it, right? But they may come up with a certain kind of visual style or a color scheme or something that they want to use. One of our personal branding strategist students from a while ago, who was mostly a resume writer, although she does so much more than that, she was creating brand briefs for people where it would tell them the color scheme and the fonts and things that they might want to use in their communications, in addition to sharing resume, bio, those types of things with them. Of course, we can create a LinkedIn banner that uses some of those colors and have that visual reminder of who the person is in addition to everything else. I think we think about this with our headshot, right? You don't want your headshot to be totally different than what you look like day to day, so that you have that visual consistency even with that. So your headshots have a few different ones, but obviously you look the same. So one thing to be careful of with an AI image, it really you've got to make sure you pick one that is looks like you look like real. Like, we don't want to be way skinnier than we are, or whatever. You have perfect skin in there, but then you don't in real life, right? You want it to be you. So even if you use AI, if your system isn't giving you something that looks like you, try again. Because you've got to have that visual consistency. And of course, our headshot's going to be a big part of that. And then if you're sharing or commenting on LinkedIn posts or in a industry group, right? We've talked a lot about the power of industry groups. You're always thinking about that thread. And if you're sharing stories, is there any way to weave in some of that story without being promotional of yourself, right? So that you're connecting to people and you're building that consistent brand. We used to call it through bits and bytes. That's what Deb always said, right? And tell that story through bits and bytes of all the different things that you could say. So Valerie's, yes, researching things about the people so that you can connect the story to what they do and what's their story and how can you connect with them. And that's key when you're picking that hook, when you're picking the story. I love that. Thanks for sharing, Valerie. And then you're thinking about any other little things that you can do for memorability. And these, I think, are going to be somewhat personality dependent. And you know, those people that have the little emblem in their LinkedIn headline, which I think a lot of people have gotten rid of because LinkedIn got mad at people for that. But maybe they always using that same color or that same icon. We tend to use yellow and blue hearts in our stuff, right? Because yellow and blue are our brand colors. And so thinking about, are there little ways, a sign off or a signature or something that shows up visually? It could be wardrobe details. Had a trainer once and she wore these red shoes. I kind of feel like in some ways my hair does that for me. There's nothing I can do about it, but it does it for me. People remember, oh yeah, your hair, whatever. Then you might have phrases that you use, again, thinking about those strengths and what you want to be known for. Are there phrases that we want to use over and over again, kind of that verbal brand? This is interesting, thinking about our behavioral branding. So that consistent way of showing up with our energy, with our listening style, with the questions that we ask, or the fact that we do ask questions when maybe others don't. And, you know, I've been told that like my brand behavior is that warm kind of listening. And I'm an introvert, so I can't get around that, right? I can't try to be something that I'm not. And so thinking about what does that look like? And how do you want to show up authentically? And then how does it connect for other people? We're not going to be everybody's cup of tea. So thinking about what do you want to show up as and how can that connect with people so that you can do the best you can do from your authentic place. When we're trying to be someone else, it's exhausting, right? We don't want to do that. I don't know if any of you watching the replay, if you have a visual cue that you use, maybe a color or a hairstyle or shoes or clothes or something, or you're thinking about it, would love to hear that. Valerie, I don't know if you have one. And then those cues kind of become a connector for your audience, that they see that color or they see, you know, you're wearing a certain color or whatever it might be. That can be helpful. I have a lot of bright blue in my wardrobe now, as that's our color, brand color. We used to be a darker blue. And then, I don't know, maybe almost 10 years ago, we rebranded to a brighter blue. And thankfully, some of my favorite stores have had those kinds of colors on sale. So I tend to wear those colors, bright blue, and that can help. So what is your signature sign off, favorite metaphor, color scheme, whatever it might be that can help you stay memorable? And always checking that against your audience, right? Does that make sense with my audience? So if we're thinking about memorability, it's about that connection, first of all. So we have to know ourselves, what's authentic, what do we want to say and do over and over and over again, and our audience, what's going to connect with them. Then we get down to maybe 3 or 4 stories that have that thread and that will connect with different audiences so that we can build that memorability, but in that emotional connection way. And then thinking about the visuals of our brand, behavior, our words, you know, the way we show up visually, both online and in real life. How do we have those pieces connect so that people see that consistency? And as our workers might be going back to the office, you know, starting that from their first day, that they're thinking about how do they want to build their visual brand. And it doesn't have to be forced, right? It's coming from that authentic place, but with the audience in mind to connect those two dots. So if you are interested, well, two things. One, our Certified Personal Brand Strategist class starts on the 26th, so 2 weeks from today. If you're interested in joining that, let me know if you have any questions. It is an opportunity to go step by step through and build a process to help someone with their brand, to help them really understand who are you, what do you want to be known for, and who needs to know you? And then how do you build the communication plan to make that happen? That's what this program covers. Very excited about that. And then other thing, and I don't have a link for this, but on Friday over on my personal LinkedIn page, or if you're on YouTube or Facebook, it's the same place you are right now. But on LinkedIn, it's on my personal page instead of the CTL page. We're going to be talking with William Arruda, pioneer of personal branding, the founder of the Certified Personal Brand Strategist program that we teach. He is going to be talking with us about using AI. So you can use AI to help you do some of these things, help you do this with your clients, especially the like customer persona beat and some of those activities that we need to do. And so we're going to be talking about how you use AI to help personal branding instead of making you blend in. So join us on Friday at 1:30 Eastern time, at 10:30 Pacific time on my personal LinkedIn or the Career Thought Leaders YouTube and Facebook. And if you have questions for William, send those to me. Let me know, or you can comment on the event post that's on my LinkedIn feed today. And we'd love to hear your questions about using AI for personal branding. So we'll be back next Tuesday for another Trend Tuesday Live. Actually, we'll be talking about some of this new talk around AI taking jobs, and Microsoft put out their list of jobs that are safe from AI. We're going to talk about that a little bit next week. And of course, we're going to weave in how personal branding connects. I will look forward to seeing you then if we don't see you on Friday. And thank you for sharing and commenting with your thoughts. I love that. And oh, Valerie, you've got a phrase. Keep doing it right. Yes, your podcast. Thank you. And we'll see you next Tuesday.